Hi everyone, thank you for joining. So, can you please confirm if you can see my screen and you can hear me? Am I audible?
Excellent, you're audible.
Okay, thanks. Sure, then I'll just begin. Yeah, hi, welcome to the problem solving session 4. And like always, we will first just go over the brief theory that you must have gone over in this week's lectures. And then I have compiled questions which are based on previous semesters and questions of exams. And we'll have a general solving session so that it gives you a quick recap of what happened in this week. Right. So, in this week, the lectures covered the module of atmosphere, where there were three lectures in this module. First was structure and composition, second was atmospheric circulation and weather, and third was climate and climate change. So, the first one is basically talking about structure. So, what all you find in the atmosphere and how are they layered and how they are structured. Once you know what gases and what kind of layers are there, next part was how do these atmospheric circulation happen and then how is it related to weather. And the third part is of concern because we are not talking only about climate, like how the climate changes, but what effect climate change can bring in today's world. So this is a very important topic and we touched upon that topic in this week. So let me begin. um, yeah, so like last time, um, you know we had seen this image last time as well, where we had this confluence of four layers and how they are connected to each other. So as you can see, you have biosphere, lithosphere, hydrosphere and atmosphere, where we had discussed lithosphere in the last session. Today we are going to discuss about atmosphere, and briefly you describe atmosphere as that layer that contains the air that we breathe, and it is a blanket of gases that surround the earth and is held together by gravity. So these gases are lighter. Ideally they are free flowing, so they should be moving away, but they are surrounding the earth, and that's because of gravity of earth hold these gases at place so that they don't escape away. And then these gases stay in the earth's atmosphere and it makes several changes to the atmosphere, and what changes and how is what the whole module is all about. Okay, so moving ahead, let's go to the first lecture of this series, which is structure and composition. So like I mentioned, atmosphere is basically layer of gases where you need the gravity and temperature which is required for presence of atmosphere. So think of it like this: if there is less gravity, there is no pull towards the gases by the planet itself, then every gas will just escape away. So there is nothing to protect the. Give me just 1 minute. Yeah. So think of it like this: so if there is no gravity, there is nothing to hold a gas by the planet, then all the gases will escape away and there will be nothing that forms atmosphere as such for that planet. But then also temperature. So if your temperature of the planet is too high, it's very hot, then as you know, if there is increase in temperature, gas start expanding and they start moving away. So if your temperature is too high, then your like the gases will expand more and they will escape away more. So there has to be a balance between the temperature and the gravity for in a planet or for any thing that you are referring to, for there to be an atmosphere. And as discussed in the lectures, if you go back to the lecture and if you remember, Jupiter and Mercury were pointed out. Jupiter has the largest atmosphere, largest in the sense of blanket that is around the planet, that is the largest. Mercury has very thin. And why is it? It is very intuitive based on the two parameters that we just saw. If you look at Jupiter, it's a big size planet and it has low temperature. So the temperature is negligible and there is gravity now which forms a layer of gases around it which forms the atmosphere and which is the thickest. Now Mercury, this is closest to the sun and it has very high temperature. So even if there are gases, all the gases are expanding and just escaping out. So there is a very thin layer of gas that is remaining, which is why the atmosphere of Mercury is very thin. And this is how you connect both these concepts. So now Earth's atmosphere, we have already now spoken about Jupiter and Mercury. Now about our planet Earth, we know currently, I'm pretty sure you would have read in several textbooks and papers that you have nitrogen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, water vapors, all of these are there. But this were not the scenario always. They have evolved to this over millions of years. And part of this we had already covered in the previous lectures, that we had seen how Earth has evolved. So there is a screenshot of or a snapshot of that evolution on this slide. So if you see, Earth's atmosphere started from being just hydrogen, which is part of the solar nebula gases. So from those, so earlier Earth had only gases from the solar nebula, and which was also primarily hydrogen. So there were more hydrogen in the Earth's atmosphere. But again, hydrogen is very light. It has very low molecular weight. And as you know, low molecular weight and gases, by their inherent property of expanding and flying away, it got lost from the atmosphere. Next stage was, like at the next stage, when there was a prominent change in the atmosphere, there was increase in the nitrogen and carbon dioxide concentration. And this was because degassing. So basically, Earth started cooling down. So when Earth started cooling down, temperature started going down, the gases started settling in. Instead of expanding and going out, it started settling in. And that's when you had more of nitrogen and carbon dioxide. The third after this, which is the current state, or which is the state where most of the biodiversity have evolved, is where you have low carbon dioxide and high nitrogen and oxygen. Why is that? Because oxygen is required by organisms to grow. Carbon dioxide is required to maintain the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere. As you know, carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Without these gases, Earth will be very cool for any organism or biodiversity to survive. So carbon dioxide provides that blanket around the Earth that retains the temperature from the sun and heats up the Earth, so that Earth doesn't go too cool, so that all the organisms die here. So you have carbon dioxide, but you also have oxygen now and nitrogen, because you have several kind of organisms on this planet. We breathe out carbon dioxide, but there are also several organisms that breathe out oxygen. Example, plants. So they take in carbon dioxide, give out oxygen. So there's more of oxygen in the atmosphere with nitrogen. So this was the scenario when you had all these different biodiversity coming up, plants, animals, and different kind of other animal kingdom and plant kingdom, if you remember. But the recent shift that you now see is that there is more of increase of carbon dioxide and pollutants, which is because of anthropogenic factors. And this is where climate change is connected, because I said having carbon dioxide is important for Earth because it's a greenhouse gas. So you need that temperature to sustain in Earth. But if carbon dioxide level goes too high, the same thing that it has been doing, that it is trying to capture the energy and heating up the Earth. Now that heating up extent increases, and the Earth starts heating up to a very high level, which is not expected. And that's when all the problems begin. And that we will see in the last lecture, what exactly can happen if there is an increase in the climate change. Right. So before we move on to this, now that we know that the Earth's atmosphere, there is a considerable atmosphere layer around Earth, let's try to see how they are structured. So this was also in the lecture where you had seen that there are 5 layers to atmosphere on Earth. You begin with troposphere, which is just around us, which we see. So that's troposphere. Then you have stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. So I'll just briefly go over these layers that you see. And in this schematic on the diagram, you can see that the prominent feature of this layer is in that image. And in the lectures, each of these layers were described in great details. So I'm just giving you a summary of that. You can always go back and check. So troposphere is like the bottom. It's the bottom layer of the all these layers that are arranged in the atmosphere. And here is where you have the rains and hot air balloons. All this fly here. temperature of this layer decreases as you go higher up. So these 0 to 10 miles are basically the distance, the distance of the layer around the earth. So 0 to 10 miles. So as you move away from the center of the earth, you move towards the higher end, the temperature starts becoming lower and your like gaseous component get cooler there. So above this layer you have stratosphere. Between these two layers you have the ozone layer, which is again very important as it traps the UV lights or UV radiation from the sunlight. Now above this layer, ozone layer, is where the airplanes fly. That's because in troposphere, if you remember from the lecture, there are more of water vapors and more of clouds here. So because of clouds and water vapors, flights cannot move through easily. So what our flights do is they attain a height which is just above troposphere and then fly in this region, in the stratosphere, making it convenient for them to fly up and then come down whenever they have to. Now, in this layer, instead of the temperatures decreasing further, the temperatures increase as you move towards the higher end. So this can fluctuate within this layer based on what kind of constituent the layer has. Whether it is more of clouds, more of gases, more of other components, compact layer, how much pressure it is experiencing. Next, you have the mesosphere. And here you have the meteor showers. If you have seen meteorites and meteor showers, then this is the layer where these meteorites are more prominently seen. The next is thermosphere. Here you have the satellites which are released from the planet Earth, and these are housed in the thermosphere of the atmosphere. And then you also have aurora borealis and australis. If you know, these are lightnings of meteor showers. And they are lit up the sky literally in green color, and those are from the thermosphere, so they're very, very high above the atmosphere. Now you see this Kármán line. You can keep it in your brain. I will come back. So this will be joined with another I can say aspect, and then I will come back to this. Why is it important here? And then lastly, before the above thermosphere, you have exosphere, where you have temperature which is close to zero. So you can imagine how cold it is. And there you have the big ISS satellites and spaceship that fly in those layers. So these are the 5 layers that you have in your atmosphere. Now, atmosphere, as we have already discussed, has nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So these are by percentages how these gases are present. So you have nitrogen as the most abundant gas. Then you have oxygen. Then you have argon, and then in very trace amounts, you have carbon dioxide, neon, helium, methane, krypton. These are all as discussed in the lecture. But along with these two, you also have water vapor and dust particles. And they are important because they contribute to the atmosphere. They are specially mentioned here because they play an important role in sustaining the atmosphere. For example, let's begin with dust particles. So clouds, as you know, they are just fleeting masses of gases. But for them to begin forming these big clouds, they need a part where they start settling in. So dust particle gives them that region where these gases can start settling in and form the cloud. So that's why when you are looking at the atmosphere, dust particles, salt, these are important for you to understand that these are the places where you have formation of clouds. And next you have water vapor. Water vapor, as I have said, that these are part of greenhouse gases, so they're important in retaining heat for the earth. So that's why not just gases, along with gases, you also look at water vapor and dust particles for an Earth's atmosphere. Next, what else affects the Earth's atmosphere is insolation. Insolation is basically, as you can see in the image, at what tilt or at what level does the Earth receive sunlight. So Earth is tilted, as you know, so that means that not every region will acquire the same amount of sunlight. First. Second, it is also rotating. So each face of the Earth, when I say face, I mean this. If you see in this image, just a second, in this image, right now the Earth, if you know this continent, this is Africa. So part of West Africa is right now eclipsed away from the sun. So this is far away from sun. It is in the darker region, so it receives less sunlight. It is rotating, Earth is rotating, and you have the Asian Eurasian plate receiving most of the sunlight. So by energetically also, the regions in Earth will be different because Earth is rotating and is also tilted. So what are we trying to look here is how are the sun's energy perceived by the Earth, and this gets affected because of several reasons. One, rotation, as I mentioned. Second, season. So there are also seasons where you have more clouds, you have less clouds. If there are more clouds, there will be more blockage to the entry of sunlight. If there are less cloud, clear sky, you have more sunlight coming in. So seasons. Then you have the location of the Earth. So let's say there is a place which is very uh, beneath or very in the center of several regions. So that place is, because it is landlocked, it can't receive most of the sunlight. But there are some regions which are very open and they can receive sunlight. So the region wise also see a sunlight variation happens, and that's important because this gives rise to several properties like what is the weather of that place, what is the amount of what is the temperature of that place. So you have different regions in this Earth, and that we had discussed in the first lecture also, where you have different biodiversity or biogeographical zones. So that's why what we wanted to see here is that Earth atmosphere is not uniform and it keeps changing and is very dynamic. One reason for that is insolation, which is the amount of energy perceived from the sun by Earth. And along with that, not every, already your Earth is not receiving equal amount of sunlight. On top of that, not every bit of energy that is received is taken into the Earth. Most of it is actually reflected and given away. How is that? For example, from sunlight, UV radiations are given by way of the ozone layer. But there are several other layers and components that reflect the Earth's. Just a second. Yeah. So there are several components which reflect away the sunlight that enters Earth. So let's just go over the schematic. So you have, let's consider whatever sunlight you are receiving is 100% sunlight. Now from that sunlight, at the entry only, from the atmosphere, 6% of the radiation is reflected away. It's just at the atmosphere before the clouds. Clouds are bulky. I'm just talking about fleeting gases which are moving ahead. Now, when you come down, when the sunlight is coming down, they encounter this huge chunk of clouds, because of which 20% of the energy is reflected. So you already have lost 6. Now you also have lost 20% more. Then when you come down, there is this the layer, the lithosphere that you remember, the land. From the land also, some of the sunlight is reflected back. From there, you are reflecting back 4%. So you're already losing 30% of the sunlight till it reaches the atmosphere, the lithosphere. Now on lithosphere, you have lands and oceans, you have plants and animals. There it is 51% that is taken away, taken finally into the atmosphere. Now this was reflected, that is sent back, but there is also absorption where the energy is kept to itself. That also happens during this incoming, where you have atmosphere is reflecting 6% but also keeping 16% to itself. It is absorbing 16%. Clouds are reflecting 20% but keeping 3% to itself. So there is also reduction in the energy because of these absorption. Finally, in the lithosphere, which is, so this absorption is what is utilized by the organisms or by the component. So here land and oceans are absorbing 51%. Basically, if you are receiving 100% of sunlight, it's only 51% that is being used by the plants and animals on the planet. Now from that, again you have several things that are being reflected back and they are carried back to the atmosphere, that are then redirected out of the atmosphere to maintain this cycle. But what is important here is that from the incoming sunlight, you are only using just half of the sunlight that is being received. That says that in regions and during times when the sunlight is not received by any region, how important it becomes for it to retain all the sunlight that it is receiving so that they can sustain life, right? All these will connect to climate change, because when you see this from the lens of climate change, you realize that this natural cycle is getting disrupted and it is affecting so many places and so many plants and animals. Right. So this chapter, this lecture, which was about the structure and composition, spoke about atmosphere, how are the atmosphere constrained of, what are the layers and how are they partitioned. So these are some of the questions that are from this lecture. I will wait here and we can try and solve this after maybe 4 to 5 minutes. These are all the questions that we have just discussed. Okay, so let's look at the answers. Right. So the first one is, which of these create the best suited conditions for atmosphere in a planet? So this was the first thing we had discussed, right? You need high gravity and low temperature so that gases are there can be present around the layer of the planet. Next is, which of these is more prominent in the troposphere? These are ways of movement of gases. You have conduction, convection, advection, and radiation. And out of these, convection, which is the movement of warm gases and colder gases, that's most prominent in troposphere. Next is, which of these factors does not determine air temperature of a place? So air temperature is basically temperature of the region. You have altitude, latitude, and air masses. What are the amount of air that is moving in that place that determines the temperature of the region? Humidity is another parameter when you are defining the region. So you say temperature is this and humidity is this. Humidity is the amount of water content in the atmosphere, not part of the temperature. Temperature is determined by what is your distance from the ocean, so that's altitude. Where exactly are you from the equator? So how much distance you have from the equator, that's latitude, north or south hemisphere. And air masses, what is the amount of air in the atmosphere that's surrounding that region? So that gives rise to the temperature. The next one is, how long is the solar cycle? That is 11 years. So what I mean is, solar cycle is the sunlight itself changes periodically, and that period is 11 years. But even if that is there, The Earth's movements still in these 11 years also keep changing, and that changes the sunlight over the 11 years on the Earth. So nothing is constant, is basically what the idea is here. And next one is, again, this we had discussed, which of these contain most water vapor and aerosols? It has to be troposphere, because that's why flights move away, ahead, like above troposphere, where they don't encounter these. The next set of questions are these, and I will again discuss in another 2 to 3 minutes. Okay, so so the answer will be, so first one says, how much of the solar radiation is absorbed by the Earth? We had just discussed in the figure there that the amount of solar radiation that is absorbed by the Earth is 51%, if you remember the flow chart that I had shown. Next is, which of these is not regulated by solar energy? So weather patterns, rains, and movement of air and ocean water, these are regulated. Movement of clouds is not by solar energy. So sunlight doesn't affect the movement of clouds. It's something else, and you know that is about gravity, which lets the clouds move, because that's again gases that's basically moving them from one region to another. And gases move because of something else that we will discuss in the next lecture. Next is ISS. ISS orbits its winch layer. So where is it present? These ISS, International Space Stations, they are present in the thermosphere. This we had seen when we were discussing the layers. Next is noctilucent clouds, which are clouds that shine, the bright clouds. These are present in the mesosphere. The last one is important. It says, which of these is a criteria to mark the edge of the outer space? Geocorona here is the answer. Now I will go back to the atmosphere layers. Here, the other thing is Kármán line, where I had said that I'll come back to it. So this Kármán line and geocorona is where you can start saying that these are the regions where the outer space starts or begins, you can say. So when does this atmosphere leads to the space that we talk about when we talk about the Earth's extent? So we say the outer space start from here, Kármán line, which is below thermosphere, and geocorona, which is some 6 lakh kilometers away from the Earth center. So that much distance away from the Earth center is where you have the outer space starting for the Earth atmosphere. Right. So this was all about the first lecture. Now let's move to the second lecture, which was atmospheric circulation and weather. Now here are several important concepts. These are basically telling you how the gases move, how this atmosphere is dynamic, how do the gases move from one place to another, one region to another. And as with anything else, any movement is from across a gradient, from a high gradient to a lower gradient. And what is a gradient? The gradient here is on the pressure. So if you have high pressure region and if you have low pressure region, air, which is part of the atmosphere, moves from a high pressure region to a low pressure region, which is resulting in winds. Winds is what every one of us has felt. So wind is flowing because of the changes in the air pressure from a higher air pressure to a lower air pressure. And in how do you calculate air pressure? As you would have seen in the lecture, it was said that this is calculated by the barometer, where what they are actually looking, what is this pressure? Because pressure has to be because of something, presence of something. That is because of the water vapor, the hydrostatic pressure. And you calculate this by something very similar mechanism to understand. This is a barometer. So let's say you want to understand the pressure here because of this water column. So what you want to understand is how much pressure is this water exerting on this surface. So what do? You calculate the height of this water column, such as the h. Then you have gravity, which is acting here, so the gravitational force, and rho is the density of the liquid. So what is this surface that is experiencing the pressure? So you have height into the gravity and into the density of the liquid that is flowing through the column. That much pressure, that is how you calculate what amount of pressure the surface is experiencing. And this is in terms of water. When you consider it air, when you consider, let's say you are considering here, right, air. So you will say how much air is present over this surface, and that will determine the pressure. So if there is more level of pressure here, the thickness is less here than here. So if you see the length, it has, I'm sorry, just a second. So if you see here, this part is higher than this region, because of which what happens is, just give me 1 minute. Yeah, just a second. Yeah. So if you see this place and this region, which one will experience more pressure? That will be this region, because if you see the number of, or the height of the layer above, it is greater here than here, and that's why you have more water molecules giving pressure here than in this region. So you have more water molecules here than here. That's why this has more pressure and this has less pressure. And now if you have air, which is, suppose you have to experience wind, you will experience wind in this direction, because the wind will now move from a region of higher pressure to the lower pressure. So this is how the wind moves, and this is how you intuitively understand which one has more pressure and which one has less pressure. So this gives rise to wind. And then if you feel you have felt wind, you will see wind is coming from your horizontal direction. So that's horizontal distribution of air pressure, but there's also vertical distribution of air pressure. So when you say vertical distribution, you basically mean across the north-south gradient. So here the air pressure keeps decreasing as you move up, and it's very intuitive to understand. If you are near the land, you have the maximum atmosphere above you. As you keep moving ahead, your atmosphere above you goes down. So your amount of pressure that you keep experiencing becomes very less. So your pressure decreases as you move higher. Now you already, so this also gives rise to a high pressure and a low pressure region. And this formula here is what was discussed in the lecture, where how you calculate the pressure of a region. Now there is a high pressure, low pressure gradient, but you don't feel wind here. That's because it is not strong enough. What actually gives rise to this movement of air mass, how does this air mass move because of the pressure, is because of horizontal distribution of isobars. Isobars means similar pressure. So here in this image, as you can see, or if you refer this to the lecture, you will remember that these are from the lecture image where you had the yellow color lines. So all these circles here are basically regions which have similar air pressure. So if there is similar air pressure, these are the regions where you don't have polar wind. But slight modification from this region to this region is where you start feeling the winds. So this is how horizontally they are distributed. So air start moving from one region to other because of these pressure differences, and that's high enough for them to move the air masses, which gives rise to wind, which is what we feel, and it is what is perceived when you are seeing the atmosphere is dynamic. Now there are several type of movement, and these are all very important. I'm pretty sure you must have already gone through the lecture, so this will be easier for you to refer, but let me just go over it once again. So yeah, just a second. Right. So on the slide, you have two things which are very important when you are understanding atmosphere. You have air masses and your type of fronts. So air masses are basically what type of air is present around you. We are here. I'm from Bangalore. You must be from some other place. So what type of air is flowing around you? Is it hot? Is it dry? Is it warm? Is it cool? All depends on what kind of place you are and what kind of air mass you have around you. So this here is, as you can see, is the world map, and what is mapped onto this is the different kind of air masses that are present here. So first of all, to understand this, CA, all these are letters which have some full form. So for example, C is for continental or land, M is maritime or water or ocean. That means it has most of the region is composed of ocean or land. And then you have E, which is equatorial. So you have this region which is near equator. Then tropical, above the equator. Polar is extremely towards the extreme ends. Arctic and Antarctic are the most extreme part of the land masses, right? So these are the different regions where you consider the air. Now you have, let's begin with the first one, which is this MT. MT is, M as you know is maritime, so water, and T is your tropical. So these are maritime tropical air masses, which are, as you can see, are present in just above the atmosphere equator in the water bodies. And these air are moist and warm as expected because they are coming from water, so they are very high in water vapors, so they are moist, and they are very hot, they are warm because they are just above the equator, and equator receives the most sunlight. Next you have ME, which are these. M again water, but from the equator region, so they are also moist, but they are not warm, they are hot because they receive direct sunlight, so they are very hot in nature. Next you have MP. Now the same water, but this time in the polar region. So these are moist because they are coming from the water bodies, but they are cold because they don't receive sunlight, so they are cold. Next, which are from the land air masses, you have continental tropical. So again at the same region, but this time from land. So here they are from the land, so they are dry, but because they are in tropical, they are warm, right? They're just above equator. Then you have CP, which is C being land from polar. And you can imagine if it is land, it's dry, and it's polar, so it is cool. So dry and cool. And the last ones are CA and CAA, which are continental, but they're Arctic. Arctic receive the least sunlight, so they are very cold, and they are dry because they're coming from land. So this is how you can classify the region and the air masses that is present there. Along with this, the other aspect is front. Front is basically you have this, you can see, right? For example, here you have this so warm air which is moving with a cold air, or warm air is moving with a hot air. So you have two type of air which is moving in vicinity of each other, and these, where they are connecting or where they are joining, they form a front. These fronts can be of different type. It's easy to understand and it's not that difficult, so I will just quickly go over it once again. So first you have stationary front. So there are these two masses are moving, and then there is this boundary between these two. But these two masses are not, or these two air masses are not encountering each other or not driving each other away. So they are not doing anything to each other. That's why this is a stationary front. So none of the air masses is replacing the other. But when you have replacement, you have cold and warm front. So for example, cold here, right? So cold front is when you have a cold and dry stable air replacing the warm and moist unstable air. Warm air are unstable air because warm means air is heated up, and as you know, air heats up, so gas expands and things start moving away. So this is an unstable air that is moving. They are just constantly moving here and there. But cold is when you have gases which condense, they start compaction, they start moving towards each other. So this air is stable. So when you have a cold air which replaces the warm air, this is a cold front. The opposite, when a warm air is replacing a cold air, it is a warm front. So front is basically which one is coming ahead. So cold is coming ahead, so cold front. Warm is coming ahead, so warm front. So remember, these are two air masses. Now these air masses, two air masses from a front. Now you have two fronts also that can change each other, which is occluded front. Now occluded front are of two types. If you remember, you have cold occlusions and you have dry occlusions. So cold occlusion, you have to just remember it carefully. Cold occlusions is basically you have a cold air mass which is overtaking a warm air front. So basically it's this simple thing. This colder one is overtaking this warmer air mass. But before the warm air mass, you have another air mass which is cool air. So you have warm, cool. So you have a colder temperature which is overtaking warmer, and before the warmer you have a air which is cooler than this. So it's basically able to replace this as well. So what is that? It moves below air masses. Why below? Because cold means they are dense. So it replaces the warm one, moves below it, but the other one which is before this is also lower in mass than the one that is replacing. So that's why it moves beneath both of these. So that's cold occlusion. Warm is opposite. So when it is overtaking and the mass above, so it is overtaking warmer air, and the one above is below, in front of it is actually warmer. So what happens is the cold air moves upward, because right now the front air is denser, so it will stay bottom. So this cold air overtakes it and goes up. So you have these two fronts when there is occlusion happening, cold and warm. So warm, how can you remember? Basically, you need to remember the air which is present before the warmer layer, what kind of air it is and what kind of layer it will form. Right? This is important, and you need to be very clear when you are understanding this. And based on these movements, you have these different wind patterns across the globe. So you have westerlies which move towards the west, and they are both in north and south hemispheres. So you have westerlies, you have polar wind, and then you have trade winds which are at the equator. Trade winds have a very interesting naming phenomena. They are called trade winds because they help in the movement of the like the sailors, and these were used for their trading times in Earth back in before in the 18th century. So because these winds help them move towards the region where they could trade, they are called trade winds, and they are always there in the atmosphere, and you can see the directions. So if in north hemisphere it is moving in certain direction, it will move in the opposite direction in the southern hemispheres. So you need to remember that as well, right? And that's all because of what kind of force it is being acted upon. And like I mentioned here, that these are perpetual. There are also some winds which are not perpetual. They only come at certain time. One of them is seasonal. So if you have monsoon, you will have. So you also experience this, right? When then is winter, you have different kind of winds. When you have summer, if you are from a very hot region in India, you will feel loo. Especially if you are from the northwestern and northern region, you will feel very hot air blowing onto your cheeks. That's loo. So that's only during the summers. So those are seasonal winds, and they are very dry air if they are from the summer region. They are very cold if they are from the winter region. So these are seasonal winds, and then you have local winds which happen almost every day and at different times. So you remember in the lecture you had sand breeze, land breeze, sea breeze, land breeze, mountain breeze, valley breeze. So these are all breezes or lower amount of air masses that are moving following the air pressure and temperature differences. So for example, here you see land heats up during the day, and when anything heats up, the air becomes warm and it starts moving ahead, because warm means basically things have started expanding. So your warm air starts moving up, forms to a cloud. As it goes to cloud, as it rises above, temperature goes down. It starts forming, getting denser again, and then comes back to the planet into the ocean, which via sea breeze comes to the ocean, and then via land breeze goes up into the atmosphere. And this is just at land and ocean. If you have mountains and valleys, you have similar kind of winds where you have valleys and mountains where you have regions of high pressure and low pressure where the winds move from one region to other. So this is also very important because you need to remember this, how are the winds moving. And I mentioned here, these are local winds, these are perpetual winds, or these are daily winds, but you have some very strong winds which are capable of destructing the surroundings, which are called cyclones. Most of it is in the tropicals, so you see them in the oceans. Tsunami and cyclone. Tsunami is a bit lesser version of damage than cyclones. Cyclones are very high damaging. If you remember, in India also we recently had cyclones. So we have these Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, and we keep getting alerts on cyclones. So what happens in cyclones is you have a region of low pressure which is warming up of the ocean, and the air starts moving up. And because this is a huge air mass which is moving, you have all of these moving up with a great force, and then as it moves ahead, you suddenly encounter cool air, and it becomes cool, so it comes down. So what was supposed to rise up suddenly comes down, and it becomes this huge splash of water that's happening. But it's not just at a very small region, it's at a very large region, and that's why the impact is very high. So these are all tropical cyclones, and in tropicals you know that temperatures are very high, because of which the oceans get heated up and the temperatures raise to a very high extent, and that's why you have these cyclones. You also have cyclones which are not from tropical region, which are called extratropical. So you have these cyclones in the polar region. Because it is cyclone, it has same damage, but then because they rely on heating up of the ocean body, it relies on the temperature of the atmosphere, which is dependent on sunlight. So these regions are affected by the insolation, but tropical, especially with ones at the equator which receive maximum sunlight, they experience cyclone at a very high rate. Right. So that basically sums up this lecture, where we have very nicely seen how air is moving, how dynamic this atmosphere is, and how circulation of air happens, and what all changes happens when you see from a perspective of atmosphere and when you bring it down to land and ocean. So I have some questions, and these questions will summarize all that we have read so far quickly. And because we have one or two participants, I will probably wait for 2 minutes, and then quickly we can discuss these answers and move on to the next lecture for finishing up this session today. Okay, so let's quickly do the answers. So the first one says, which of these air masses is hot and dry? So as you know, dry, so it has to be from continent, and it is hot, so it has to be from tropical. A CP is continent and polar, so if it's polar, it has to be cool and dry. If it is maritime, it has to be warm, and it has to be basically moist, not dry. So remember this classification, it becomes easier for you to remember that. Next is Desh are dry, cold. dry and cold tells you polar. Prevailing winds that blow around the high pressure area of polar highs of the north and south poles. So basically these are found in poles, and as we had seen in that globe image, that the wind that moves in the poles are called the polar easterlies. Easy thing to remember, you need to just remember by name. So next one says hurricane force with a speed of greater than 118 km per hour has a Beaufort number. Beaufort number is basically a scale based on the speed of the wind. So when you say a wind, you talk about its direction. That's why you have all the direction on the globes that I had shown, and the speed. So speed and direction tells the property of the wind, and speed can also tell us about the level of destruction it can cause. So 12 is basically the highest that you can see in a Beaufort scale. 1 is very cold. So you have 0, which is the least, and then you have 12, which is the highest. And 118 km per hour is a very high speed, and that's why it's very destructive. So on the Beaufort number, it is to be towards the upper end, which is 12. Next is which of these forces do not affect velocity and direction of wind. Wind is affected by 3 forces. This was discussed in the lecture, which are Coriolis force, frictional force, and gravitational force. Electromagnetic force have no effect on the wind. So these forces, they determine how the wind flows, at what speed, and in which direction, and if it flows at all or not. And lastly, we have Chinook and Lu. So these are examples of hot non-periodical winds. Non-periodical winds, these are winds, local winds, but they don't come always. They come not seasonally, but they are not. They come. They're locally produced. They don't come in great periodicity, and they're very hot of nature. And the opposite of this is cold non-periodical. Hot periodical and cold periodicals are again local winds, which are periodic in nature. So these are also discussed in the lectures. Okay, the next set, again I will wait for 2 minutes and then we will discuss the answers. Okay, so let's look in the answers and you can check if you are getting it right. Okay, so atmospheric pressure can be represented in various units. You can write it as atmospheric pressure, you can write it in pascals, or you can write in millimeter Hg, or that's basically you represent it what is the water column. The liquid here being mercury. So this you need to remember, and that's why I gave it here, just for a reminder that you need to be very particular about the unit and the conversions. Next is, what is this phenomenon called? So if you look at this phenomenon, this is again discussed in lecture. Please be mindful when you look into the lecture. So you have land here and sea here, and a breeze is moving from the land to the sea. So the breeze is named from the region it originates, and here you can see the breeze is originating from land, so it is called a land breeze. Next is wind is described in terms of, this is just what I had discussed, that it is discussed in terms of direction and the speed. Next is, which of these is referred to cold front overtaking a warm front? Two fronts are overtaking each other, so it is an occluded front. Last one is, which of these forces is a fictitious force acting on objects in motion within a frame of reference that rotates with respect to an inertial frame. So the name is very, like descriptive. This is Coriolis force, which affects the wind. Frictional force is basically friction to the movement. So frictional force is highest at the land. So you can as the air mass moves away from the land, the friction force loses its effects. So friction force is highest at the land. Electromagnetic force does not affect wind at all, and gravitational force, again the same thing, which it impacts the speed of the wind at what force it moves. Okay, so coming to the third part now, which is climate and climate change. So climate and weather are different from each other. Weather is basically talking about a short-term state of the atmosphere. So you have basically talking about changes in the atmosphere in a very short scale. But when you're talking about climate, you are basically talking about long-term weather patterns. So when you talk about climate, you are basically summarizing over a large time period. So when you say rain, today is rain, tomorrow is windy, then it's sunny, this is basically we are talking about weather. But when you talk about tropical climates and you say about subtropical region, or it's more of a cold region, it's basically you are talking about the kind of weather it has been over a long period of time. If it has been tropical for most of the time, then it is called a tropical climate. If it has been subtropical for most of the time, it is called a subtropical climate. So this climate, so I told that weather change is relatively frequent. So you see these changes happening very frequently, but climate change is not that frequent. It is supposed to be constant over a period of time. It's exactly why you are calling it a climate. But recently you have been seeing that climate also changes at a very significant rate. What is significant? You can have climate change for a certain duration, like a shorter period of time. You see that the climate has changed from tropical to subtropical, or like windy to rainy. But that's not significant, because at the next moment it will come back to its original set. But when you see a statistically significant difference, which is this was region which was tropical in region, now it is becoming subtropical and it is not going back, that time you know that it is a statistically significant variation, which means that either the mean state of the climate or its variability has increased. So either it is switching from one state to another, or the rate of changing is increasing at a very fast rate. That time it is called climate change. And this, if it again happens over decades or longer, this is called, this is when it is persisting in nature, and that is when you term it as climate change. Now, climate change, this change is natural, so it does take place because of natural processes, and at that pace it is generally at a slower pace. But when you pull in anthropogenic factors into it, it becomes all of a sudden at a very high pace. It becomes you can say too demanding. So all of it, the changes become very frequent, and that's when it gives rise to problems. And what kind of changes does climate change brings along? It brings along changes in the atmosphere and in the land use. That two components that we have studied till now. So when you describe climate of a region, you have several components that you take into consideration. You have atmosphere, ice, ocean, land surface, and vegetation. Now, what are we talking about here? Atmosphere is what is covering, or the blanket of air around it. It is just the surrounding vicinity. Ice is the polar region where we are talking about the Antarctics and Arctics. Ocean, as just now we have spoken about the atmosphere, ocean is about the hydrosphere, the water content. Land surface is the lithosphere that we had discussed in the previous session, and vegetation is what grows on these lands and what is present in the ocean. So when you describe climate system, you take into the interaction between all these. You say, hey, the climate has changed, so the oceanic temperature is changing. So ocean temperature is changing, so the organisms that are present in the ocean will see a change in their distribution, see a change in their behavior. Or you say the land temperature is increasing, so the soil is becoming dry. soil is becoming dry, so this plant is now not able to grow. This plant is now not able to grow, so the oxygen content level and the carbon dioxide level in the vicinity of that atmosphere is changing. So you see all of these are interconnected with each other, and that's why when you describe climate, these are all taken together into force into account, and that's why this is called a system, climate system. Now, how are these changes brought about? They are some changes which are brought about by external features, which are plate tectonics. This we have discussed in the previous sessions in detail in your lectures, where you know that because of plate tectonics, you can have these ocean and land interaction when one moves over the other, because of which you have changes in the physiographic form. Your ocean route changes, as your ocean changes its route, its plains, its deltas also changes, and the kind of vegetation it grows also changes. So that's one of the ways of altering this interaction. The other ways is changing Earth's orbit. So Earth's orbit has features like its tilt, its eccentricity, which is how much it is moving, and then it has several other features which again affect the climate system, because your Earth's movement affects this amount of sunlight that is penetrating, how much air it is experiencing, how much pressure it is experiencing, and that affects the climate system. And then of course you have the sun strength. Not only the amount of sunlight that is coming, what is the extent of it being absorbed by the land, and how much it is coming and with time it is coming, how much it is exposed to sunlight, all this affects the climate system. Now, as these external factors influence the climate system, it brings about changes in the atmosphere. So let's say there is a region which receives very high amount of sunlight, and as we are now talking about, let's say, ocean. So this ocean receives a lot of sunlight, so the water starts heating up now, and the air above it becomes warm and keeps rising. So there is a region of low pressure that is being maintained. But not only that, along with that, that's atmospheric change that we're seeing. The ocean is also becoming warmer, right? So there are some animals which prefer cooler water. Now the water is becoming hot, so that the kind of distribution that animals in the ocean will have is also changed, because the water temperature is changing. And we had discussed it in one of the very first lectures, that any organism has a range of tolerance. It can only tolerate this much amount of changes in its temperature, and if that range of tolerance goes askew, let's say it increases to a very high content, then the organism has to move away so that it can survive. So that again brings about a lot of changes. So this is just one example how climate system gets affected. And this was where I had mentioned about changes in the ocean. You can have change in the land, you can have change in the vegetation, ice. So similar case, instead of ocean, if you place ice now, if ice is receiving let's say not sunlight, but the temperature is increasing in the earth, and the warmer temperature leads to the melting of ice. So you have now less ice cap on earth. Most of them are melting away. Once ice melts away, what happens? Water content increases. So ocean, the water level goes up. So once the water level goes up in ocean, if it crosses a certain barrier, it gives rise to floods. It gives rise to other problems. So you think everything is connected to each other, and that's why all these at a natural controlled pattern is okay, because that's how Earth has been sustaining. But all these patterns are now undergoing rampant shift, and that is because of anthropogenic factors, that is human induced factors that we have already looked into the first lecture that we had looked into. And these anthropogenic factors are increasing all these changes at a very, very quicker pace, and that is leading to changes at a very high scale, such that Earth is not able to come back to its original form in a desirable time frame. That is where problem begins. So what happens with these rampant changes? So you see here, so what is actually causing the climate change, or these increase in the temperature, is these greenhouse gases, aerosol emissions, and the way we are using land. So we are doing deforestation, we are clearing of trees, we have discussed all these problems in the first lecture, and because of this, your carbon dioxide contents or the greenhouse gases content is increasing, aerosol is increasing, the pollutant level is increasing. So what is the immediate changes that is happening? The immediate change is that first it brings a change in the hydrological cycle, because you are first of all changing the pattern of land use. You are causing deforestation. There is deforestation, there is less of trees, less of groundwater, so your hydrological cycle changes, your rain pattern changes. Next, you have warmer land and air, which is what I've been talking about, that as you more greenhouse gases, more capturing of sunlight, more heating of the earth, and your land and air becomes more warmer. If your air is getting heated up, your land is getting heated up, your oceans are also equally getting heated up. So your oceans are also becoming hotter. And these increased temperature, when you go to the polar region, it leads to the melting of ice. Now, melting of ice leads to increase in water content of the sea and the ocean. So there is rise in sea levels. Next, we had also discussed about pollutants moving into the ocean, which leads to ocean acidification and something called eutrophication, where you have algal blooms, right? So you have these pollutants. These pollutants are creating acidification of the ocean, which changes the pH of the ocean, and the animals which are staying or which are in the ocean gets affected. But along with this, you have pollutants that come into the ocean. This leads to eutrophication, which is algal bloom. So there are some nutrients, in the effluents you have sulfates, you have nitrates. This leads to increase in algal bloom. Now, as algae is growing, it is using up the oxygen of the dissolved oxygen of the ocean. Now, if ocean's dissolved oxygen is being used up by algal components, the remaining the oxygen which is actually being used up by the organisms which reside in the ocean, the marine animals, for them the oxygen level is going down, and that's hampering their survivability. So that's how they are connected. Next, you have global greening. So global greening is basically being affected because of the the impact of deforestation that we are doing. You have similarly change in ocean current. We have already discussed that you have air current which are now becoming warmer, and warmer air is basically what moves ahead. So if you have suddenly these infrequent movement of air, it gives rise to changes in the ocean current. And that's why you have extreme weather. You have all of a sudden droughts, you have all of a sudden floods, cyclones. These are all becoming so frequent in today's atmosphere. So these are direct, immediate effects. What are the other impacts that can happen because of these changes? So you have risk to water supplies. As I mentioned, your groundwater levels is going down. So the water supply that is supposed to be reaching to each household is getting affected. Next, you have conflict and climate migrants. So one region is becoming excessively intolerable to humans. So they start moving to other place. And this leads to increased migration. Now, migration has several other problems from many different perspectives. So, and if I discuss that, then it will take a long time. But just to understand that it leads to migration of people from one region to another. You have flooding because of increase of water. You have flooding of coastal regions. So if you know that currently the monsoon is at a very high pace in several regions of India and they are experiencing flood, and so most of the regions are coastal, but some regions are not coastal but still yet experiencing a high level of flood. So these are what the 2 points here are talking about. Next is damage to marine ecosystem. If you had looked into the lecture, you would have realized that there is something called coral reef bleaching. So this is coral reefs are basically, these are present underneath the oceans where you have a lot of animals that reside on the coral. But because of the increased pollution and the increased temperature, these animals and the ones that reside on the corals are moving away from each other and getting disappeared. So the coral, which is very colorful, looks very bleached now. So those are ecosystems which sustain the marine environment and they are getting hampered. Then you have fisheries failing because if you remember, in the first problem solving session, we had discussed something about over harvesting, overfishing. It's what we are referring to here. Then you have loss of biodiversity because of extinction, change in seasonality, rapid shift of your rains to summer to winter, all these things. Heat stress, increased heat, habitable regions of pest expand. So let's say there is mosquito, and mosquito likes to grow in pools of water. And now because you are having increased flooding, you will have more of these mosquitoes and you have more of diseases. So your disease and your type of pest also change. Forest mortality and increase of risk of fire. So if you are if you're doing deforestation, you basically drying down all the leaves, and they become more prone to fires, forest fires. And of course, you have damage to infrastructure because there is a high level of cyclones and all these different natural phenomena. And then lastly, you have food insecurity because of your unsustainable agricultural practices. Some food aspects are also getting affected, and that's leading to food security problems. Right. So on slide, you have different kind of responses to climate change. I will explain the scenario, and then I will wait for maybe 1 minute for you to guess what exactly I am talking about in this, which problem is being highlighted here. So on the left, you have an image. So this is a mountainous region, and these are some animals. For example, here it's butterflies. So these insects stay in the lower uh, elevation of the mountain region. And as the temperature has gone up now, you can see some of the butterflies moving towards the top. So what is happening here? Can you take a guess? And what is the problem associated with it? So the problem that is being highlighted here is the spatial distribution change of insects here. Now, these animals or these insects are suitable to stay in the lower elevation, but because of heat, they are moving to higher elevation. So temperature is being taken care of. But what about the food? They are staying here because they can find their food, their habitat. So their habitat being the kind of places they would like to be, the timing, the other partners that they are encountering. As they started moving up, several other things keeps changing. For example, their food, their mates, their own relationships. So, for example, if they have just have reproduced, where would they carry their organism of offsprings with them? So these could be maladapted to the region that they are moving, and they don't realize because they are just focusing on the temperature shift. So these are the kind of changes that you see. And but with that, what can happen is, let's say if it is not able to survive, if it's not able to adapt to the new environment, it will go extinct. It will go face, it will die, and that will lead to its extinction. Next is this. So you have a pool of water, and you can consider this to be an insect. So over time, because of this pool of water, now the number of insects is increasing. So what is happening here? So this is also change in distribution of the insects, but this time from a different perspective. There, changing in the distribution is a negative impact for the insect in its own. Here, what is happening is, let's consider this to be a pest, for example, mosquito. Now, pool of water was less, so there was one mosquito, but now because it has become a very common phenomena, so the pool of water has attracted more pests now. This is a problem for the humans around it, because with pests, your problems, your diseases increases, and with increase in disease, your health gets affected. So this is not an issue for the insect, but for the um, inhabitants of the associated habitats. That is a problem. Last is this. So what you are seeing is that there is this tree. You have a white owl and an orange owl, and so you have two of orange owls, and then you have most of them as this white owls. Over the period of time, because of increasing temperature, you have now most of them being the same, but you still have the tree which has become orange. So what does it say? What can it become? So what you're seeing is that it will lead to change in allele frequencies. Allele frequency is basically changing the number of your alleles over the period of time. And I will explain how this from a better example. So this is a classic case of industrial melanism, and this is because of pollution, which is also contributing to climate change. So pre-industrial time, there were no suits on the barks of the trees, right? So the bark of the trees were white in color, and you had these white moths which could easily camouflage and stay on the tree, and no predator will notice it. And the black moths, the black forms of the moths were less in number because they were easily predated. Now you imagine a white background and then on that a black moth is sitting. That is easily predated. Its number goes down and its frequency is less. So the black color allele frequency becomes less because of predation, and this is pre-industrial time. Now, after industrialization, you have soot coming from the factories. These soots are black in color and they get deposited onto the bark. Your bark now becomes black in color. Now the same black moth which was being predated can now easily camouflage because the background is black. So now the black color is not predated upon, the white color is being predated upon because white color is not able to camouflage anymore and their number was very high. So they are easily predated and the black color ones are surviving. So what happens is because of this change, your black color frequency is going up and white color frequency will go down. So there is a change in the allele frequency. So this is because of soot from the industries. You can consider a change in the temperature which prefers, so for example, let's go back here and let's put that increase in temperature leads to orange color owls surviving more. So if they survive more, their frequency will increase and they will survive more, and the other ones will go down and their allele frequency will change. So allele frequency is basically the number of the population changing. Right. So we have discussed in depth about climate change, that how is climate change happening, and this I have only discussed some of these problems. In lectures, you have several other problems that has been highlighted. Now, how to deal with climate change? There are two ways to deal with climate change. You either adapt to it or you either mitigate. Mitigation is you take measures to avoid further climate change. Adaptation is adapting to the changing climate. So your climate is changing and you accepted the fact and now you are adapting to it to sustain with it. Mitigation is you are trying to solve the issue so that you don't have the issue of climate change anymore. And there are some concepts that are common to both. So let's look at each of them individually. So the first one is adaptation, where you are trying to say that let's adapt to the climate change that is happening. And how do you do that? You build some climate resilient infrastructure that even if the climate changes, the infrastructure will not go down and the ones who are inhabiting in this region will not be affected. And you keep coming up with plans on disaster management. So you know that climate change will lead to disaster in future. And you start taking measures of disaster management plans so that you are ready and equipped with plans to tackle the issues whenever they come. Just a second. Next, mitigation. Mitigation is, like I said, that you are now devising methods so that this climate change doesn't happen. For that, you have measures like you reduce the reduction. There is a reduction in emission, so the carbon dioxide reduction or the greenhouse gases reductions. You use renewable energies. You don't rely on the non-renewable energy sources like coal and others. You rely on solar energy, wind energy, which are renewable, and they do not increase the carbon dioxide load. And you go towards energy efficiency. You try to conserve energy. You try to lessen the carbon load on the atmosphere. But some principles are common to both of these approaches. For example, you have to conserve the natural resources. You are doing it at community level and you are doing it for the well-being of the community, both of these methods. And there is a creation of shared value. So all of these candidates cannot be done individually. Everyone together contributes to the overall growth. So that's a shared value that is being highlighted here. And like I said, that you have mitigation and flowchart which go hand in hand. Mitigation is first trying to say that let's try to first avoid it. Adaptation will come at the end when I cannot change it any further, when I cannot see that I can change the climate change happening. Then I start adapting. So what do? How do you begin it? Let's say there's a climate change effect that you see. You see the impact. If the impact is minimal, then you don't need adaptation. If you don't need adaptation, then you can think that, okay, that's not important for time being. But let's say the impact is too much. So now you start first by thinking if we can mitigate the emissions to control these changes. Now you have success in the mitigation, then your impact becomes minimal, you don't need adaptation. But if you have a failure, then you take mitigation and adaptation call. So if your mitigation is not possible, then you go to adaptation in case of failure. or you don't consider this at all and you directly go to adaptation. Instead of this subpath here of thinking about mitigation of emissions, you directly think that this is too much for me to control mitigation. So you think it's impossible and you directly go to adaptation. So you started directly thinking about adaptation. Now, when you think about adaptation, you think about adaptive capacity. And what is that? That is the ability of a system to adjust to climate. So if your adaptive capability is there, then you need to think in that perspective. If you are not equipped to adjust adaptive capacities, you cannot adapt, then you have to think in another perspective. So let's say that if you have adaptive capacity sufficient, then you know adaptation is possible, and then you try to build measures. If you don't have currently, it is not capacity is not sufficient for it to amend and adapt itself to climate change, then you have to make it possible by capacity building, and then only adaptation is possible. But if it is not possible here, like let's say you have discovered that adaptation is not possible, so you either go for capacity building or you go back to the original route and think if mitigation is possible. So all of these are basically cyclic. It is not a one-day step or a 1 year or a 2 year program. These are long-term programs for long-term changes, and they are all hand in hand. So there is very integrate details between each of these. Right. So now, this is the last bit of today's session. These are questions which summarize the entire chapter or this lecture, and I will wait for 2 minutes, and then we can go ahead and see if you were able to guess the correct answer. Right, so this coming to the answers. So the first question is, which of these is not an example of habitat level destruction due to climate change? Polarized, exotic and kelp forest are prime examples of changes due to climate changes. So for example, polar ice is melting due to climate change. Exotics are increasing in their range of expansions for climate changes, and as we had discussed, that exotic species bring along with them a lot of problems for the native species. Kelp forests are another example where due to climate change they are getting disrupted. Deforestation is leading to climate change. It is not a result of climate change. This is causing climate change. Next is carbon sequestration in geological sites is an option for mitigation because you are sequestering, so you are trying to reduce the emissions. Next is change in activities, rates and rhythms increase susceptibility to diseases. These are biological response to climate change. What type of biological response? They are physiological changes. So what we mean by this is, when you say phenology, remember we had discussed about change in the flowering time, which leads to asynchrony between the flowers coming up, but there will being no animals or plants or insects to pollinate it. Genetics, we have read about the allele frequency changes, and biointegrity is habitat level destruction. So these are all the biological responses, among which if you have change in activity and rhythm, the behavioral changes, these are physiological changes. Next is the government came up with a regulation that incandescent bulbs, which are replaced by LED bulbs, so that electricity consumption and release of carbon dioxide from power plants is reduced. So which is this? Is this adaptation? Is this deceleration, maladaptation, or mitigation? And this is mitigation because again we are talking about controlling the emissions here. Next is what is the current extinction prediction rate, which is 2.8. The other that I have mentioned, they are at different, their predictions if we take into account for different other factors that was discussed in the lectures. The last set for today, and again we'll wait for 2 minutes and then we can wrap it up. Yes, so let's look at the answers. So surplus seeds and sperm banking is an adaptation option to facilitate resilience to climate changes. Next is which is not a climate change component, oxygen concentration, because oxygen concentration do not contribute to the climate change or greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide, rainfall, temperature are all part of the measures that are taken for looking into the climate change. Next is the adaptability of a system to adjust to climate change, to moderate potential damages, to take advantage of opportunities, and to cope with consequences. Our definition of adaptive capacity, as we had discussed, that you are able to adapt to the climate change effects. Next is which of these does not contribute to the effect of Earth's orbits on climate change. So these are different effects on Earth's orbit, but among these, the tilt of the Earth does not contribute to climate change. The other three affect the climate change, as we had discussed and as we would have seen in lectures as well. The last is classical period for taking averages of climates. As I had mentioned, weathers and climates are two different based on the time frame that you're considering. For climate, you consider a longer duration, and the duration is 30 years. Right. So with that, today's lecture comes to an end, and we see each other in the next session. Thank you.